Is your software development team using a coding standard? If not, you are doing it wrong, and you might also be hurting your ability to hire and keep talent. Let's talk about why, and I'm going to do my best to convince you to adopt a coding standard if you don't already have one. Coding standards, also known as coding conventions, are a set of language-specific rules that your team agrees to follow when writing code. A good coding standard will typically tell you how to name things, how to format your code, and how and when to use comments. These rules can be as strict or as loose as your team desires. Your coding standard does not have to be a 20-page formal written document that your team spent 80 hours creating. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. As I said, the standard does not have to be overbearing, and it doesn't even have to be correct. You heard that right. The standard can even be wrong. It just needs to be a standard that everyone is following. It must be something you can point at and say, this is the standard that we use when we write and review code. So why do you even need a standard? Let's look at 4 reasons. First, any standard is better than no standard at all. It is hard to always do everything right all the time. You don't have to be perfect. You have permission to do it wrong if you are consistent. If you are doing something wrong and you do it wrong the same way every time, there is hope. If you ever decide to start doing it right, fixing it in all the places that are wrong will be much easier. Consistency is key. Second, using a coding standard will make onboarding new team members much easier for the same reason: consistency. Do it stupidly, weirdly, wrongly, but do it consistently, and if someone figures it out once, they can likely figure it out again. A junior developer can say, hey, I've seen this before, and understand what is going on instead of scratching their head at the 7th different way that the variable named X is being used. Third, a coding standard is a living document and can be changed. If someone decides that they hate the way something is done, the team should have the authority to discuss and hopefully come to an agreement that everyone is blissfully happy with. Short of that, majority rules will do. At least over half the team will be happy doing it no matter what they decide. Do not allow bullying here from the senior members of the team. Being more experienced doesn't make you right, it just makes you more experienced. Being able to change what is wrong or bugging you will get your team much closer to buying into the coding standard. Do not allow the coding standard to be dictated by a manager or a team lead, and especially not an architect. That isn't what they are there for. 2/3 of these people don't even write code in a typical day. Let those in the trenches decide how to dig them. Fourth, code reviews are easier if everyone is using the same coding standard. Reviews on code that are following a well-understood standard are typically faster to perform. The code is easier to read and understand. You aren't nitpicking the things you don't like about which line braces are on. You are looking at the functionality of the code. It isn't Johnny picking on you and being the code police. It is Johnny enforcing the standard. Instead of 2 different senior developers offering 2 different ways of doing something, it is everyone on the team offering the same way. It is just less friction for everyone. Next, here are a couple of tips that will ease you into this newfound consistent world and make your stay here more comfortable. First, don't create your own coding standard. Google is your friend. Searching for Python coding standards or Java or C# or TypeScript coding standards will get you close enough. Read through it, understand it, and if it is something you can live with, start using it. If it isn't something that you can live with, either look at adopting it and making any changes that you feel you must, or look for another. There will probably be more than one standard available. Before going down that rabbit hole too far though, trust the authorities. If you are looking for a C# coding standard and see that Microsoft has one, that is the one you should start with and adopt as your own. Or Oracle for Java, and so on. Second, try to use automation to enforce coding standards. This is much easier in some situations than others. If you are using a modern development environment like Eclipse or Visual Studio, there is probably a linter available for your environment and language, and you should be able to change the rules of the linter to match your standards. Using automation like this will give immediate feedback to the developer while they are writing code. The same linting process should be in your build pipelines just in case someone goes off the rails and turns off enforcement in their IDE and it is somehow missed in review. Third, decide on how you're going to fix things as you go. So you have a coding standard that says you are no longer allowing single character variable names. Good for you. Unless you have a load of free time on your hands right now, there is no reason to go fix that in every location in the entire codebase. If the expectation is to try to fix it immediately everywhere, it will inevitably lead the team to not wanting to make changes to the standard because they might get saddled with making thousands of changes before 5 p.m., and that is not a good situation for anyone to be in on a Friday. It is ultimately up to the team on how this happens. Perhaps when you touch a file, you must leave it compliant to the latest coding standards, or maybe just at the method level. Maybe it requires significant changes to a file or method. However the team decides to do it, that is the right way so long as action is being taken. Making a standard and then not enforcing it, though, is the same as not having a standard. Once a decision is made, it is time for the team to act, so a plan is needed. Also, take the time to formally record these changes and make sure the entire team gets notice of them. It's hard to hold someone accountable for something they know nothing about. Email works, so does a wiki. It is up to the team how this occurs, but it does need to happen. Documenting changes like this also reduces the chances of a misunderstanding happening between team members about what changed when and what effect it has on the team. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned that not having a standard may hamper your ability to attract and keep talent. It's true. An experienced engineer or developer worth their salt would not want to step into or stay in a role that is too chaotic. This chaos is a symptom. Coding standards are part of the cure. Hiring the right people and keeping them around is one of the hardest parts of developing software, so any edge you get should be taken. That's it. That's my hard sell to try to convince you to implement your own coding standard. Do it. It's the right thing to do. Until next time, keep coding.